Alright, so looking at the terrain editor and building a landscape, which is something you're going to need to do for this underwater project. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to switch to our landscape mode. So that's just by clicking this little mountainscape. And that's going to put it down. So you can see it actually puts down this big green grid, and that covers a certain amount of space. And this is your actual available landscape to work in. Now, you can make this bigger or smaller. You can also make it completely fill the world by just clicking fill the world if you want to, which is pretty cool. You also have your section size and of course your sections per component. So if you did 2x2 sections, then it's going to be larger sections and also a larger spacing. So you can see it goes a bit further. And then 63x63 quads is fairly high resolution, but you can even go higher, like 127 by 127, which gives you a little more room to work in there. Gives you more room to build your landscapes and sculpt out your mountains. So once you're happy with how big it is, I think I'm going to drop back to 63 by 63. That's fine. Or of course you can tell it to fill the world if you want, but I don't think we need to for right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on create. And you're going to see it take a second while it actually builds a landscape. And there it is, so it's all gray. And you can see your pointer's changed. So my pointer's changed this like brush, which if you've used ZBrush, it's very similar to ZBrush and sculpting. So over here we have our tools. So right now we're on the sculpt tool, and our brush is a circle, and we have a smooth fallout. So I can just start creating. And you can see that builds. That starts to build my mountains. Right, so you can see them showing up there. And then of course I can change my tool strength, like maybe instead of 0.3, I'll do a value of 1. So now you can see it pulls them out really, really fast. And if you want to go down instead, you just hold down shift, and you can see that I'm actually digging down. And this is one way you can make your your underwater areas, is you just have this kind of gradual drop off here. So I'll change that like 0.3, so we can build this kind of gradual drop off that will allow you to then kind of walk down into the water if you wanted. Okay, so that's kind of like looking at how the brushes work, and let's kind of go through all the brushes. Let me build a couple of more mountain tops here. Okay, so there we go. There's some mountains for us. Now, of course, you can always increase your speed with our camera speed button right there. It's like I'm now at 6, so I can move around my large landscape much easier. And I kind of need to fill this in, because now this is a bit too jagged. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my sculpt brush to flatten, and wherever I clicked, it then kind of uses that height to flatten this out. So you can see I've now actually built this nice little flat area that we could make into our kind of underwater place, etc. And we just need to sculpt up this walking path so that way we can do that. And there's a very cool way to do that. It's called ramp. So I can click on ramp and click and drag, and you see how it auto goes up. And then once I like that, I can just hit enter, and it puts the ramp down. Right, so pretty simple, pretty easy way to do that. And then of course I can kind of smooth that out. Right, so there we go. So now I actually have a nice, I can walk right down into the water, you know, depending on if I make that the water or not. And then we can do all that fun stuff. So let me check my sizes real quick. So I'm just going to go back to my place mode. I'm going to delete this wall. That way I can just kind of step out into the environment. So here it is. You can see I gradually go down. That works pretty well. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and grab this water volume that we made earlier, and I'm just going to throw it down here. So I just hit end, and that threw it to the ground. And again, it really doesn't matter if it like goes to the environment, because it's just not going to matter. And I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going to put the top of my water. We'll say there, that's fine. Okay, and I'll hit play again. So I'm like, oh, look at that beautiful water, which we haven't built yet, I know that. And then slowly go under it. And now we're in the water. And then I just died. So, the reason I died is because this world has a kill Z on it. So kill Z is going to prevent you from going down too deep. So we need to make sure to turn that off. So if I go to settings and world settings, we have something called kill Z, negative 1,000. Make that negative 150,000. That way you can go down pretty deep without it affecting anything. Okay, so that's kind of how you build your landscape. And let's look at some more of these cool tools. So if I want to work on my landscape again, I'm just going to click on landscape. That's going to bring me right back to it, like it doesn't miss a beat, so I can keep working. And that was smooth. And then I can do sculpt again, right, and just kind of raise this stuff. But then we have some cool brushes in here. We have like erosion. So this is wind and sun erosion. And of course, it's a really high tool strength for that. But so you can see that it just kind of uniformly erodes it down. But if I do this other one, which is water, hydro erosion, it actually tries to find a part where like the water would run together. So you can see it actually built that right here. So it built this little trough that the water is going to run down and pool in. So it does that automatically, which is pretty cool. And then noise is just basic random landscape generation pretty much. So you can see it's going down, it's going up, it doesn't matter, it's just all random. Okay, so now what we have to do is we have to make the actual materials for this. We have to make the landscape materials. So landscape materials are a little bit different, they're a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to go back to my place mode, I'm going to make a new folder. I'm just going to call it landscape mat. So working with landscape materials, we have to actually build a complex material. So I'm going to go ahead and import some landscapes for you guys, or some textures. I gave you these textures. You can find them online. So let me bring them in. So these are them right here. So you need the diffuse as well as the normal maps, and we're going to bring all those in. So I'll go ahead and import those. So I'm just dragging and dropping them in. There we go. So they are. These ones have bump maps instead of normals. The one that does have a normal map is the ice one, which works pretty well. And of course you can also just download some if you want. Like you can get terrain textures pretty easily. Like I'm going to bring the grass one that we already have, that Unreal already has. Like if I click content and type grass, we get these guys right here. So I want both of these. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. And I'm going to move them, that way it's just easier for me to find them. So landscape material, I'm just going to select these two. I'm just going to move them. So we'll just copy here because it's just two textures. Yep, there they are. Okay, so now if I go to content and go to landscape materials, let me turn this off. There we are. So I have grass and everything now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply go ahead and build my material. So right click, new material, and just call this landscape. I'm going to double click that. And there's a couple of different things we have to make. First of all, we have to do a landscape layer coordinates. So I can just type land and I get landscape layer coordinates, so I just bring that out. So this is going to be the UVs of this thing, which Unreal auto generates. We shouldn't have to worry about that too much. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring in my samples. So the first sample I'll bring in is this grass. Put it up here. I'm also going to bring in its normal map. I want to try to keep them in the same order, and you'll see why in just a second. So there's grass, grass, grass. So then we'll do ice cave and ice cave, which is going to go under. And then let's grab one more. We'll just do like stone chunks. And this one's going to be a bump map instead of a normal map, so it's a little different. It won't look quite as good, but it'll be fine. Okay, so what I have to do is I have to go ahead and connect all of these together. So I got to connect all of these to UVs. So that way they're all actually going to be using that landscape UV system to make itself work. There it goes. I'm going to move this out of the way. So pretty easy. And now what we have to do is we have to create something called a landscape layer blend. So I'm going to type land again, and we get landscape layer blend. We go ahead and bring this in. And then what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to go ahead and apply a couple different things. So for one thing, I'm going to go ahead and add elements. So there's one element, 2, 3, which is what I have. Perfect. And then I'm just going to connect these. So RGB, RGB, and RGB. Okay. Now what we have to do is we have to actually name these things, or it won't work. So I'm going to name this one grass. The second one we're going to go ahead and name stone. And of course the third one is, or no, the second one was ice. Second one was ice. And the third one was stone. Okay. And then I can Control C. Whoops. I can just copy that. So I have it over here. So that way these are all tied together, and don't worry about the comment. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and move this over to base color, and I'm going to move this into normal. So it's going to apply them all together, and then what that's going to do is that's going to give me like this kind of weird nebulous material, because it really doesn't know what to show us at this point. It just kind of gives it up. So then I'm going to go ahead and save it. Okay, now we actually have to apply it to the landscape. So I'm going to select the landscape, come back to my details tab over here, and we're going to click and drag landscape, and we're going to apply it. So we're going to apply that to the material, or we're going to apply that to the landscape. It's going to go completely black until we set up something. So I'm going to switch to landscape mode, and then I'm going to click on paint, and then you can see it has grass, ice, and stone. So it knows what we're using. However, it is all black because it doesn't know what it's trying to do. So I'm going to click this create new layer info. I'm just going to do a weight blended layer, and you can go ahead and put these wherever you want. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and put them in my landscape material folder though. And I'm going to do that for each one. That way it knows what I'm trying to do. And you're just going to see them show up as these things right here. Okay, so now you can see that it actually put my landscape on here. Now you can do a couple different things for these. You can actually scale these up. You can do all this stuff. But for just all intents and purposes, this is how we put a landscape together. Now I'm going to click on stone, and then you can see that if I just click, it's going to go gray as it recompiles. But then it actually paints the stone on top. right? So if I click on ice, it's going to go ahead and paint the ice down, right? So you can actually just paint right on the landscape, and it'll take a second to update. There it goes. And you can just, and that's exactly how you do it right there. Really, really easy to do. Now we have some tiling going on, which is pretty normal with landscapes, but what you want to do to get rid of that is just simply either use some scaling or you break it up with a lot of foliage and stuff like that, which helps quite a bit. So let's say we've got that, so I'm going to go ahead and do a scale of 2 and save. And it's going to take a second to come back. There it is. So now you can see it's quite a bit larger, but the tiles are a bit larger, so they're not quite as easy to notice. And of course, when you get real close, they look fine. Like you can't really tell that it's tiling. Everything looks okay. All right. Now, one more thing for landscape is called foliage. Foliage is how you actually put down a bunch of different assets really, really quickly. I'm going to use it to make some coral and put down like some undersea area right here, which is pretty easy to do. So I'm going to click on foliage. And of course, I'm going to go over here, underwater assets, static meshes. These are all my static meshes. So it wants us to drag and drop them. So I'm just going to drag and drop the different foliages I want to use. Okay, so there they are, and you can see my brush change to this like kind of orb thing, and if I just click, it throws them all down, right? Like completely willy-nilly, no regard for spacing, no regard for anything. It just stacks them right on top of each other, which is not really how we want to do it. So I'm just going to Control Z that, and we're going to look at each thing here. So if I click on just this coral brain red, we can see it has density. So how many are there going to be? So I'm going to say like 5 instead. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn off all these other ones, and all you do is click that check mark so you can decide what you're painting and when. So if I click that down, you can see that I'm now barely throwing them out because it's not letting me have that many of them together really close. It's letting me keep them separate, which is really handy. So just by adjusting some of these values, we can actually get a really realistic and kind of evenly placed field. So it also tells you how many are in the scene right now. So there's 108 in there right now. So I'm going to turn these on. So I'll turn on, let's see, we'll do this and some kelp brushes. And of course I'll click in here and do some stuff. So I don't want them to be that dense. So I'm going to do 20. So they're going to be a little bit denser. And then the radius for how the minimum distance between foliage, so I'm going to do 5. And then we have scaling, and this is what can add a lot of realism to it, because if they're all the exact same size, realism is broken. So I'm going to go free, and it's going to be a minimum and maximum. So I'll just do a minimum of 0.5. And then maybe on Z a max of 1.5. So that's going to give me just a little bit of variation in here when I put these down. When I come look at the kelp, we can do the same thing. So I'm going to do this at 12, and the radius around them, they can be close together. So I'll do 1. And then of course my free value, we'll just do 0.3, 0.5, 0.4, just kind of using some different values. 0.5, and we'll do 1.2. Okay, so now I'm going to turn off my brain coral and put this down. So you can see it's adding them to the environment, and of course they're actually different heights and sizes, which is cool. Let me do it over here so I'm not in the volume. And I'll turn down my camera speed just a little So you can see that these are no longer the same size, which did a lot in actually making it look like there was some true variation in how it's going. And also, if you look, Unreal will automatically try to follow the normals of any object, so it actually will paint on the mountains correctly. Like, you don't have to stress about that. Okay, so that should give you the landscape, how to make the landscape material, and you may want to grab your own textures and stuff for the landscape material, just because those ones aren't necessarily the highest quality. You want to download some really, really large ones and build it with that. So you can see that it looks just fine once you're down on top of it. And once I get into an area with like coral and stuff, you can see that those break up the pattern. So it's really hard to see then, and everything looks much, much better. And then you're just going to put down the coral. And you can also do it to do like foliage and stuff on the top. Like if you look at the grasslands, which is really cool. So if I come in here, grasslands, environments, earth, static meshes, there's a bunch here. So there's like a tree, so I'll put a tree on there, and maybe some ground cover here, and some leaves, another tree. There we go. Okay, so I'll turn these guys off, and then I'll come back over here to these ones. So the trees we want very, very spaced out, to be spaced out pretty good. Of course, we want free again. There we go. And we'll leave those as default just to get them down there. Alright, so then I can come right here and I can just hit play. Or I can paint them down, and they're going to flash a bit while it's compiling the shaders. So you can see them coming together now as the shaders get compiled. And we got a little bit of Z flicker, and that's just because of how those piles are constructed, so there's not really a lot I can do about it. And it's just how it tried to put them on the landscape, so those ones I probably wouldn't recommend using. But you can see it did a pretty good job of putting down these like cool kind of everything together, and it made a fairly realistic looking environment. Putting the leaves and stuff under everything looks pretty good. Unfortunately, it did try to stack the leaves too close, so you can see them just kind of fighting with each other right there to be displayed. But for the most part, you can see it worked pretty well. Alright, so that should give you enough to get started on your underwater project. I'm also going to be going over the menu system, so you can actually have a level that opens into your underwater level, and all of that stuff. But I hope this was helpful.